they also have access to step onto an authentic medieval hoarding.
Shadowversity.
Greetings, I'm Shad, and as you can see behind me, I'm at CAERPHILLY Castle in Wales, and this thing is a monster. It is actually the biggest castle in Wales, second biggest in all of Britain, all right? So this is huge. Now, not only is it a massive castle, it's actually one of the most impressively designed in regards to its defensive fortifications. It's what is called a concentric castle, which means it actually has like a castle within a castle. It has an outer wall and then another wall that rings it entirely. Not only that, it has multiple layers of gatehouses, and those in particular I'm very interested in seeing, because like one of the weakest points of a castle is actually the entry point, which is why they were fortified so heavily. And not only that, on castles like CAERPHILLY, they're given multiple gatehouses, which means you have to go through multiple levels of defense to just get into the innermost section of the castle. So we're going to be taking a look at some of those gatehouses in this video, as well as how they are designed. Now, when it comes to CAERPHILLY Castle, what we see behind me here, it has such a rich and long history, and it has gone through multiple battles and sieges and has received extensive damage. Now, we're very lucky that there was also extensive reconstruction on the castle, and that reconstruction restored a lot of the castle, and it looks like a lot of that reconstruction is actually quite authentic, and the castle is looking in a great state. But we're going to be able to try and see a difference in some of the original ruins of the castle with some of the things that have been reconstructed. Now, I'm really excited to get right in and close up at CAERPHILLY, because this is a castle that I've mentioned a number of times, and one of the features that's quite awesome about this castle, one of the last gatehouses, or primary gatehouses, which is the one that I'm pointing out right here, I believe, has these two big beautiful windows that are facing the inside of the bailey. And I've referenced it a lot in past videos as an example of, yes, castles could have very large windows as long as they are situated in a more secure kind of place. And if they're facing the outside, they would want to be very high up, or they're facing the inside of the bailey. And so I've referenced CAERPHILLY a lot in videos, and so because I've seen this castle a lot online, it's particularly exciting for me to be able to explore it in person, and that's what we're going to be doing right now in this video. So the first gatehouse that we've come across is the outermost gatehouse, and so that would qualify it as one of the Barbicans. Now, I mentioned that CAERPHILLY is heavily fortified, okay? And so I think on this end, if you were to go through this gatehouse, you're probably going to run into 4 gatehouses, and that's just so many layers of defense. This type of gatehouse also has some serious defenses, and I want to get in close, and that might be one of the larger focuses of this video, just the gatehouses of CAERPHILLY and how they're designed, right? Because they are so heavily fortified. Really cool stuff. But there's other things to see that we might try and reserve for, you know, its own video as well. But we are going to get in much closer to one of the gatehouses as we travel through them. So I'm actually standing in front of the primary gatehouse of CAERPHILLY, and we can see that slot matriculation right here. Now, the reason why this is called a matriculation specifically is because it's overhanging the primary entrance. And if any enemy gets too close to the front gate to attack, well, they're able to drop rocks or shoot arrows down from this slot right here. But what's really interesting, as you can see as we come in, there are additional archways, and between those archways there are also slots to be able to drop down projectiles, rocks on enemy heads. Now, the difference here is that because they're not on the outermost wall, these would be considered slot murder holes and not an actual matriculation. This is a hugely fortified gatehouse, because most likely there'd be a slot for another portcullis as we travel out here. And on top of all these defenses, you also have arrow loops on either side of the gatehouse. And so if any enemy was able to get past this gatehouse right here, well, they can get trapped in between because they still have to deal with the door. There are slot murder holes to rain down death on people, as well as these arrow loops on either side. So we're actually standing on the right side land bridge right now, and you can see the other gatehouse far down on the other side. Now, if you were to approach this castle from this end, you would cross the land bridge and you would have to go through another gatehouse. And that little entranceway down here, that is actually a gatehouse. It has a mini portcullis and slot murder holes. So that means if you were to enter the castle from this side, there's actually 4 gatehouses that you would need to pass through. But there's something else that's really intriguing to see from this vantage, and that is the hoardings that we see on the side wall right here. Hoardings are basically wooden machicolations that can be fitted to castles in war times to allow their defenders to be able to drop stones, shoot arrows, down to anyone that's attacking the line of the wall beneath. And you can actually see provisions for hoardings all over Caerphilly. Looking at this tower here, do you see those square little holes towards the top of the tower? Those are potlug holes, and they're there so you can slide in wooden beams or poles that support hoardings. And as we take a look, Caerphilly has provision for those types of hoardings all on these walls, especially this wall right here. You can see the potlug holes very clearly. And so in wartime, Caerphilly Castle would actually look quite different than what you see right now. It would be completely ringed on the walls and the towers with wooden hoardings all around. And here we can see the underside of these hoardings up close. So they extend a pretty far distance off the line of the wall, and yeah, like, well, honestly, this would be a big deterrent for people trying to assail the walls, because usually if you're trying to besiege a castle with an escalade, now an escalade is the term for basically a ladder rush, rushing the walls with ladders in hand. And so if you are rushing the walls with a ladder, oh, you'd have to have balls to do that. But okay, so you'd get to about, let's have a look, almost this point right here. And already it would be really difficult for the defenders to shoot you with arrow fire. They'd have to really lean out pretty far to shoot people down at the line of the wall here. And of course they would expose themselves a lot. But if you were trying to perform an escalade and you had that to deal with, that's a whole other bag of fish, isn't it? Because you know, even when you get this close, you're going to be vulnerable to anyone shooting at you through the holes in the hoarding. And of course, where would you, like, the ladder would have to be pressed up against the top of the hoarding there to be able to cross above it. And so you would literally be having to cross, people able to shoot at you through the holes right there. The ladder might be pressing up right against or beside one of those areas where they can just shoot at you from. And so seeing hoardings like this would suddenly make you far more reluctant or willing to try and besiege one of these walls with an escalade. So Caerphilly has one of the most impressive moats that I've ever seen. When I say seen, I mean even seen through images. But now I'm here in person, and look at all this water. Like, this would be so difficult to try and cross to besiege the castle. Like, genuinely, it adds such an impressive layer of defense. But with a moat comes other interesting advantages. You have to understand, a castle is not just a fortress. It's also a home, but sometimes they can become small villages. And Caerphilly was actually a water wheel. Now, this water wheel was connected to a mill. What's a mill? It's how they milled their grain. When you harvest wheat, you need to mill it, grind it into flour. And of course, bread being one of the primary dietary staples of the period, having a mill was very useful and very important. So this is an example of one of the smaller gatehouses that you would have to pass through if you're approaching the castle from the right side. And what we see here is basically channels for where the portcullis would be sitting in, and that can be raised and lowered, of course. But behind me, in between these arches, are slot murder holes, which again just adds the defensive layers, even on small gatehouses like this one right here. So I'm actually standing on the other side of the rightmost gatehouse, which is the gatehouse, one of the first ones that you saw in this video. And so there's a couple of really interesting things. First of all, even on this other side, we see 3 more slot murder holes right up there. So that's like almost 6 slot murder holes along this gatehouse. They really wanted the ability to just throw down things on any attackers. Another really interesting thing, what we see here and here, potlug holes, okay? And so that is specifically there, so you can slide in the beams to brace this door if anyone was trying to bash it down. The next thing that we'll be able to see, and I've always wanted to do this, another lifelong dream, because this is a dedicated gatehouse, right? And so remember, with a gatehouse, they have two kind of flanking towers out front, and you have to go in between to reach the portcullis and door. Well, the inside of those kind of flanking towers, they're longer. They're more rectangular at behind. So they're round at the front, rectangular at the back. And when we go into it, this is fully a defensive part of the gatehouse. So what we see on the inside here is, of course, a vaulted ceiling, so a very strong upward ceiling. And then this is where you get access to the arrow loops that you're able to shoot through any attacker. And so this is one of the forward arrow loops. And just look at this. So you can actually get a decent angle of attack from that position, even with a bow. And then, of course, we have another arrow loop right here. Check this out. So it's currently, there's a bird like right there. But you'd need to step up on here. It's currently blocked with that wooden plank. But this is one of the inside arrow loops that you literally, if people have been able to bust through the first portcullis and now they're working on getting through the door, this is one of the arrow loops that you would get in close and just shoot through right at the people trying to get through that door. So far, everything we have looked at has all been part of the outer wall of CAERPHILLY Castle. We haven't even gone through the second primary wall. And so we got another gatehouse here and the primary big gatehouse right behind that. And so it just goes to show you how much castle there really is here to see and explore. So I'm in one of the rooms here at CAERPHILLY Castle, and there's something here that's very instructive to show you what a lot of the castles would have looked like on the inside, and it's specifically the whitewash. So when it comes to decorating the inside, this is a basic whitewash on top of the stone, and as a result you see a lot of the bumps of the stonework. And yes, I've seen multiple examples of that in the medieval period, and as a result the room just looks brighter overall and more livable. But another step that they often did, they would fully plaster the wall, okay, with actual plaster, and then put a whitewash on top of that, and then these walls would be really, really smooth all throughout. Now, it would have been considered plain in the medieval period. In actual fact, this type of whitewash is the type of whitewash you would have seen in a lot of commoner homes, in all honesty. And so even though it's a lot better than the raw stone, it isn't necessarily as fancy as what is far more common on really fancy castles, where they would plaster it and then whitewash and then paint murals on top of it. So yes, this is a valid historical depiction of what internal castles would look like with the whitewash, but it would have been considered rather plain and basic. So I'm in one of the flanking towers of the primary gatehouse, and there are clear signs of reconstruction, because some of it's not entirely authentic. So with a keen eye you'll notice one of the things here is actually the type of window that we see here. Historically, that would absolutely have been an arrow loop, not something that's more open like we see here. The stone is not weathered nearly as much as it should be, and see how smoothly cut this is? And this almost looks like a type of concrete as well. I'm pretty sure it's a type of concrete instead of actual stone. And so a couple of signs like that to show that really indicates this isn't all actual historical, but reconstruction. Also look at the roof. We see concrete, supports, when in reality they should be wooden beams resting on corbels or an inwards lip of the tower as it goes up, like what we saw in Chepstow. But what we also see here is a distinct line right along here, which to me is kind of indicating more earlier reconstruction, later more medieval castle. And you can tell, see how weathered the stone is here? It's been weathered back. That's showing age and weathering in the actual stones, where if we look here, barely any weathering at all. The stones are bumping out a lot more. Another case in point, do you see the stones on the side? See the weathering of the sides of the stones here. And these would be the more fancier dress stones, but this one, no weathering. So this is actually concrete stone. So they clearly did a bit of a mix and matching, honestly, between the more weathered historical ones, here, and then the more modern reconstruction. And when I say modern, it was done in was it 1920, 1930 or 1940, something around there. 1930 it might have been, the reconstruction was. But of course they did a great job, but you can clearly tell that's the newer stuff, This is the old stuff. So with the walls being so thick on many a castle, it enables the opportunity to actually have cavities. Oftentimes stairwells were placed inside the walls of castles, but here, this is one of the outer walls, and there is a full hallway that nearly runs its entire length. So unfortunately, they're doing renovations on the inside courtyard, and there's no public access. And we can't get access to the Great Hall, but we do have windows, and through here we can see, I don't think this might have been exactly the Great Hall, but it's adjoining it. And it's actually really cool to see. You see some of those beautiful feature windows. And then off to the side, you see the corbels, right? And so that's what you'd be resting, the wooden beams for the intermediate floors through here. And we can see the Great Hall through this window. Unfortunately, can't get full access because I would have loved to have seen this up close. Big feature fireplace. Look at those gorgeous feature windows. Oh, I love it. And I wish I could see the corbels that the roof beams rest on. See that? So I'm in one of the upper rooms of the primary gatehouse because it's incorrect to think that all the rooms of a gatehouse were for defensive purposes. We walked through the rooms underneath and they had arrow loops and even the room where the windlass would have raised the portcullis. But above it, you have this vast open space here. And just take a look at this. Is a huge, beautiful room, and it is a bit of a mix between the reconstruction and the original. So you can see the smoother stonework here. That's old, that's weathered. And especially up here, we see weathered actual framing of the original window that was here, which indicates this feature window, it was part of the original design of this gatehouse. And I mean, people say that castles would be dark and dank, yet look at the light that is filling this room from these two gorgeous feature windows. And just look at them, they are gorgeous. Now, I have looked at these two windows from the outside for many years, and they appear in my videos as examples of large feature windows that can face the inside of a castle bailey because you don't need to worry too much about large windows facing the inside of a bailey in defenses, people climbing through. And this is just, it strikes such a beautiful silhouette because look, you've got windows on either side and this huge, amazing hearth. This thing is absolutely beautiful. This isn't the Great Hall, but is most definitely a very grand, impressive room. And so it could have been used for any number of things. It could have been one of the more formal or finer bedrooms. It could have been one of the mediums, could have been a solar, could have been used for any number of reasons, but it wouldn't be for storage, is what I'm saying, because of how beautiful and large and open and light and warm this room would have been historically. So this is one of the spiral staircases of the primary gatehouse, and this one rotates clockwise. But what's interesting is a little door that leads to this little vaulted ceiling room. It's very, very small, and it makes me wonder what you would have used it for. Perhaps you could have fit in a small chapel in here. Maybe a little room that you could send the tutor and the child to go through their lessons, learn Latin or something. And another thing that's interesting, there's a little window here. And when you look through, it actually overlooks that large, beautiful, grand room of the gatehouse with a fireplace and those beautiful windows. And so it gives you a way to just, I don't know, take a look and keep an eye on what's going on down there. So a lot of the roof of the primary gatehouse here is reconstructed. You can tell by just what I'm walking on here. They have more modern tiles and barely any weathering on the crenellations here as well. But of course what they did get right was the size of the merlons, this full crenellated battlement right here. Look at the size of this thing, and of course you definitely have room to shoot. So I reckon if you were defending a castle, right, you're not going to be standing here constantly because they can absolutely shoot back at you. So this is where you'd get the cover. You would get your arrow, nock it, get ready, turn, loose, and then back in cover. That's what I'll be wanting to do. But then of course you have more cover right behind here in these arrow loops. Now it's wrong to think that people attacking the castle can't actually land a shot that comes through even thin slots like this, arrow loops like this. It did happen, okay? And so you'd still want to be careful, but of course you have far more cover. And See how it flares out on the inside? So it's thin here, comes wide to here, and that enables you to have a wide field of fire, and you can aim down, and it actually angles down like so on the inside of this arrow loop, so you could really aim low. What it is missing though is matriculations, because if they get too close to the line of the wall, you're not going to be able to aim for them, and this is where they would have added hoardings even to this top gatehouse that we're standing on. So access to the courtyard itself is restricted because they're actually working on renovations. You can see some kind of construction fences set up, but we get a very, very good view from one of the walls, the one we're standing on right now, and look at how gorgeous this is. Like those feature windows on the Great Hall, they would let in so much light. We are standing in a very significant, point of history, because you can just imagine the type of stuff that has gone on inside these walls, inside this bailey, okay? And look, very likely there were probably other smaller buildings ringing on the outside wall here. Wonder if they might have held a joust or two inside here. There's certainly enough room for it. Absolutely wonderful. This is another highlight for me. So we're up to the part of CAERPHILLY Castle where they have a reconstruction of a proper hoarding. And remember, those hoardings would have been fixed to so many of the walls and towers of this castle in wartime. And again, it's to enable you to step out from the line of the wall and shoot down. And I'm gonna get to be able to walk on one. So it's very exciting, because not only do they have this one rebuilt here, they also have access to step onto an authentic medieval hoarding. So check this out. Now, originally it's not going to have such a well-fitted floor because the purpose of it is to actually shoot down. What we do see, are, they're not exactly arrow loops, but they're more like, arrow holes, you could say, that you could still shoot out of, right? But if we go here, they have a display to show you that the type of hoardings historically, there would have been gaps to be able to throw things down, because we are now standing on the outside of the wall right over top. And so, as you can see there's a hole, and they're about to drop rocks through. And I've got a crossbowman who's also shooting through these things. Now I wonder, if we look over here, it would have been much, much harder to work a bow in here because you don't have the height. So maybe you'd be restricted to either turning your bow sideways, shooting that way, or just using a crossbow itself. But what we see on this image right here is exactly what see how there's a big, large gap running along the entire hoarding? That's what it would have more been like. Big gap with big holes to drop things down on attackers. I always like it when I come into a separate room. This is a room of one of the corner towers of CAERPHILLY Castle. And I love it when you run into things like this, just a dedicated fireplace, even for the rooms that are somewhat put to the side on the castle that aren't considered the grand rooms, because castles, they are also homes, and they wanted as much of the castle to be livable as possible. And so more fireplaces, the better. And it's just, again, the castle walls are so thick that you can just put a bit of an alcove in, you have enough of a stone bottom for the fire to rest on. And what we also see, and I love this, is a more proper wooden framed floor resting in the way that they would have been done historically. We see primary beams resting on corbels, but also support beams. So there's an angular support beam resting on sometimes a corbel, but also, so there's a corbel here, but it also shows the effect that there can be a cavity, a bit of a potlug, that the beam can rest inside, in on the wall itself. I just love it. It's just very practical architecture. Here is an example of a partially furnished room which helps demonstrate what I was kind of talking about. And this is actually situated directly above the room where we begun in. And as you can see, there's definitely enough room for a good amount of furnishings. I'm going to have a dedicated video on the style of furnishings because you might see that they look a little different than you might think. But going back to the topic at hand, these alcoves provide interesting areas or sections that increase the utility and use of rooms like this. We even see back here, that looks like an alcove where a garderobe is located, a toilet, essentially. And if you were having a full family living here, you would have a bed for the mother and father, and usually a separate bed, sometimes a trundle that would roll out for the children. And if you even have up to 3 children, they'd often be sleeping out of the same bed. And that is for important people, even nobility, that are related to the lord of the castle. And it's a good example because you have this fireplace which would increase warmth, livability, and it gives you some idea of other things that they could have put in here. But if this was a room with people living out of, there'd be even more furnishings. But look, yes, a table to either eat or do activities. They did enjoy board games in the medieval period, by the way. So we're on top of one of the side towers here at CAERPHILLY Castle, and we get to see the roof, because underneath us we got to see some very livable rooms. Great examples of not necessarily the most grand rooms, but side rooms that were still important and very livable. And now we're on top of those rooms and we see this right here. It's instructive. It's significant because what we see here is a stone tiled roof. Oftentimes the tiles were usually made out of slate. I'm not an expert enough on the types of stone to determine if this is slate or not. If I was to hazard a guess, it would be, but I could be wrong about that. The takeaway that I want to point out in regards to roof tiling like this is that they weigh a bloody ton. This roof would be so darn heavy. And the supports underneath it, which is large wooden beams, well, they need to be pretty large and pretty thick because they're supporting a lot of weight. But still, man, it looks stunning, like really, really beautiful. And I wonder how, it was common enough. But I wonder what the preference would be if you're putting on a roof on a castle. Would you want to go stone, or would you happy to do wooden shingles or something like that? Of course, another very common tiling, roof tiling type was clay tiles. But no, what we have here is full stone, and it's just pretty cool to see in person. So this has been CAERPHILLY Castle, and just like Chepstow, it's been a dream come true seeing it in person. What an amazing piece of history. This thing is incredible, and it is huge. And I got to see some really interesting things, stuff that I loved. They had like the hoardings, the smaller rooms. That ground room inside this gatehouse here, absolutely beautiful. And I hope you've enjoyed the journey as well. I appreciate you joining us as we took it, and I hope to see you on the next video here on Shadowversity. So until that time, farewell.